So, I played this Portal 2 song in my previous build and asked you to guess the case. So now you know, the case we will look at today is the made in China Dr. Zaber Sentry XQ69 by HZMod.
Nice.
So, I bought the case via Super Buy, which was around $130, and I paid extra $50 to ship from China to the US, which came around $180 in total. It is supposed to include a carry bag, but I don't see one for me. Damn it. The case includes many accessories such as magnetic screwdriver, a bag of screws, but the best one are the two case stands. Why do we have two instead of one? Because we can have some different configurations for this case, and I will show you later. The screwdriver and screws are Torx type, but the screws for the panel are Phillips head, so you still need to use your own set of screwdriver. We also have 4 thumb screws which are used for mounting the stands. After removing 12 Phillips screws, we can now access inside the case. The power supply pass-through cable and the power button cable are not sleeved like the Sentries, but they are very slim, which can ease the cable management process later. Before starting building, let's talk about part compatibility, but first, we need to install the motherboard. First of all is RAM. If you own Corsair Dominator Platinum or Vengeance RGB, they won't allow the panel to be closed. You need to buy new RAM. Good news for RGB rammers is the Trident Z will fit in this case, and this RAM just barely squeezes in. But, and this is quite a complicated but, let me explain. If you use Trident Z RGB with a compatible CPU air cooler, you will not be able to mount a 2.5-inch hard drive at this slot because you can see the drive interfere with the RAM heatsink. However, you can still mount it at the area below the power supply. If you want to water cool the CPU while using the Trident Z RAM in a 2.5-inch hard drive, that option is not available because there's no space to run the tube. However, if you only use M.2 SSDs on the motherboard, then an AIO with Trident Z RAM will be good to go. I need my 2.5-inch SSD and an AIO, so I opted for 2 Corsair LPX RAM sticks, which allow me to run the tube over them. You can check Dr. Zaber's website for their guide to build in this case. However, I will show you the correct way for installing the GPU, AIO, and the power supply. First, don't mount a water cooler. We install the graphic card instead. Remove the GPU mounting bracket by unscrewing 4 screws. Next, add the graphic card to the PCIe riser. Then reinstall the bracket to secure the graphic card. Now we can install the water cooler. I use the short screws and washers that come with my AIO, and I suggest you to do the same because there are less holes on this case compared to the actual Sentry 2.0. Finding the holes that line up with the AIO is much harder, and if I install the AIO before the graphic card, I could not slide in the GPU later. I borrowed Optimum's text video here to show that there are more holes to mount the radiator than the Chinese knockoff, which is why you see I could only install 2 screws. Even though it is secure enough, I think it's still worth mentioning. And while reviewing his video, I saw that he put the radiator at the bottom, which is the wrong position because it can damage the pump. But fortunately at the end, I saw him putting the GPU and radiator chamber to the top, which is a more ideal position. After that, you can install the power supply with your own screws. By the way, the included Torx screws are useless. I could only use them to install the motherboard and the SSD. Next is mounting the USB 3 port to the case and plugging the cables into the power supply, motherboard and graphic card. I used the stock cables instead of the custom made just to see how easy it is to manage. The power cables are very easy to handle. I simply plug them in and try to tuck the cables away. I did not even need to use any zip tie or velcro strap. For the PCIe power cable, I ran it around the radiator, then over the power button and into the power supply. The excess of the cable can be tucked next to the rad. The stiffness of the USB 3 cable is the most troublesome in building small form factor PCs. I installed the water block and used 2 velcro straps to tie the tubes and the USB 3 cable. After that, time to see if I can close the panel. And everything closed perfectly without any trouble. With that, time to finalize the build. Last step are installing the SATA power cable for the X60 AIO and the SSD, plus mounting the fan. You need to use your own screws. The type should be M3 20mm. Again, this case only has shit screws. I have link for the screws in the description. If your screws are too long, you can use washers or a fan groove to accommodate the extra length. Also, I highly recommend these slim SATA cables because they can easily be bent at the tight angles and truly helps with cable management. Normally I would do a test run before closing the panel. How about we risk it and just do it? Close first, run later. And that bit me because of this. The case labels the LED cable wrongly. This is not HDD LED, this is power LED. After plugging this to the correct pin, the LED ring of the power button finally lit up. Damn it, HZMod, you have one job. Unlike the Sentry 2.0, we have these screws at the middle of the top and bottom of the case, which can prevent the bulge caused by the cables. However, the XQ69 is made very strong, so even before screwing these, I don't see any cable pushing at all. Also, there's no GPU back support on the panel, but I think this good because CPU fan can have more air to exhaust through the radiator. Now to the case stands. As I already mentioned, we have 2 of them for different configurations. I saw someone use them like this by just placing the case on the 2 stands. However, I don't really recommend doing this because it seems unsafe to do. Plus the stands can also scratch the case. If you prefer placing the case horizontally like a console, using 4 thumb screws to install both stands to the case. Now the case looks more like a spider robot than a Sentry turret. For me, I prefer the vertical setup because this looks elegant and occupies less space. There is a piece of rubber included in the case, which is used as rubber feet for the stands. We need to cut them ourselves. Each's length should be around 23 to 24 millimeters. Then we can slide the rubber feet to the cracks of the stand. The black rubber does not match the white color, but without them, even plugging a USB cable can push the case away. For the fan configuration, I set the minimum fan speed at 40% so that it can help pull hot air created by the graphic card out of the case, which prevents the GPU fan from spinning too much at idle or web browsing. Also, cool air is pulled through the vent holes on top of the case. When gaming, the GPU sucks air to cool itself and the hot air will be exhausted thanks to the CPU fan. And here is the noise and temperature of the system. Compared to my MI6 build, which used a 25mm nocturnal and FF12 fan, this case only runs hotter by 4 to 5 degrees Celsius, and that is very impressive. In conclusion, by being similar to the Dr. Zaber Sentry 2.0, I don't think I need to tell you more about the performance of the case. I have been wanting this case since I saw the build on NVIDIA GeForce Garage YouTube channel. So if you are like me and want a super portable water cooling gaming system, I hope this video would be a useful guide before you getting this case. That's the end of my video. For important parts that are necessary in this build, you can check out links in the description. Subscribe to my channel to catch up with more content, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.